Have you ever wondered what truly drives extreme loyalty and the most disturbing actions? Behind fanaticism lies a complex web of feelings and distortions. Prepare to unravel the deepest layers of a mind that finds purpose in devotion and the search for recognition. What you're about to discover might change your perspective on the darkest motivations and the complexities of the human psyche. In the vast and intricate universe of Harry Potter, where magic intertwines with the deepest complexities of human nature, an imposing and unforgettable figure emerges, Bellatrix Lestrange. She's not just a powerful witch, with formidable abilities and an impressive mastery of obscure spells, but one of the most devout and fervent followers of a dark wizard, to whom she dedicates every fiber of her being, every thought, and every action. Her story and the formation of her psyche are intrinsically rooted in a magical society that, for centuries, valued blood purity above all else. Ancient and influential families, like the Blacks, to which Bellatrix proudly belongs, cultivated a heritage of power, tradition, and an extremely exclusive and elitist worldview, where lineage was the sole criterion for worth. From an early age, Bellatrix was immersed in an environment that not only preached but celebrated the unquestionable superiority of her pure blood and the inherent inferiority of all who didn't fit this restricted mold, the so-called mudbloods or blood traders. This initial indoctrination, a true cradle of prejudice and distortion, combined with an incessant search for a prominent place within her ancestral lineage and an almost desperate craving for approval from authority figures, especially her family and later, the Dark Wizard, began to irreversibly shape her perception of reality. Loyalty to her family's ideals, which became unquestionable dogmas, and to the charismatic leader who embodied them so powerfully, was for Bellatrix not just a choice, but a destiny seemingly etched in her very blood, a heritage she felt obligated to honor and perpetuate. The atmosphere in her home and exclusive interactions with other witches and wizards of her lineage reinforced the idea that her family possessed an innate right to supremacy, and that subservience to this belief was the only path to true greatness and recognition. This ideological foundation planted the first seeds of a mindset that would later blossom into something much darker, building the groundwork for her extremist devotion. However, behind this facade of devotion and conviction, there was something more, something subtle and profound that no one, at first glance, saw coming. A seed of something much greater, about to sprout. Bellatrix's turning point wasn't a single traumatic event, but rather a series of continuous experiences and choices that gradually solidified her devotion and propelled her onto a path of no-return extremism. In a world where darkness began to gain strength, where institutions felt fragile and the old order seemed to crumble, the rise of the Dark Wizard emerged as a powerful catalyst for her already present yet dormant inclinations. What was once a deeply ingrained belief in blood purity, a mere family dogma, transformed under this magnetic and disturbing influence into an almost religious fanaticism, a fervent and unshakable quest for meaning, power, and a form of redemption through unconditional submission to a charismatic and dominating figure. Psychologically, Bellatrix may have found in the Dark Wizard not just a political or ideological leader with whom she shared convictions, but a figure who filled a deep existential void. He offered her an unquestionable sense of purpose, absolute belonging, and extreme validation that she perhaps didn't find in other areas of her life, where she might have felt less recognized or special. This emotional dependence, combined with an unrestricted and almost idolatrous admiration for her master, became the basis of a profound and disturbing transformation in her personality. She began to see the world and herself exclusively through her leader's distorted lens, where cruelty was not just justified but glorified as a sign of strength and conviction, and inflicting pain on others was a mark of power, loyalty, and moral superiority. This new perspective definitively corrupted her moral compass, leading her to reject conventional notions of right and wrong, humanity, and compassion. It's at this point that any internal conflicts, if they ever existed in a significant way, between what is morally acceptable and what is necessary for the cause, began to manifest intensely, paving the way for the final rupture with any lingering empathy or remorse. She learned to suppress any trace of humanity she might have possessed in favor of unmerciless and total devotion. And it was there that everything began to crumble, slowly but inexorably. The seed of evil was flourishing, nourished by her search for purpose and acceptance. As her devotion progressed and she immersed herself ever deeper into the dark wizard's sinister ideals, Bellatrix Lestrange's mind became a complex labyrinth of unshakable convictions and an internal logic that, to her, was perfectly coherent and self-justifying. Her actions, her words, and her attitudes reveal a worldview where cruelty is not just a means to an end, but an essential tool, almost a ritual, for achieving the purification of wizarding society, and blind, unquestioning loyalty to her leader is the greatest virtue, the ultimate proof of her worth. She doesn't hesitate to cause suffering, to inflict physical and emotional pain, and the evident pleasure she finds in her most disturbing acts is a clear and frightening reflection of how her perception of reality and her own role in the world was completely remodeled and distorted. For Bellatrix, every act of violence is a testament to her strength, her unwavering commitment, and her total identification with the cause. Here we can observe the manifestation of a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance in an acute and even pathological form. For Bellatrix, her extreme actions, however reprehensible to outside observers and common morality, are not only justified but even glorified by her unshakable and irrational belief in the cause she embraced. Violence, for her, is not just a means to an end. It is a visceral demonstration of her commitment, a public and intimate proof of her dedication, and a way to validate her own existence and worth within the power hierarchy she so values and seeks to ascend. She becomes a mirror of her leader's ideals, interpreting every order, every desire, as an absolute and unquestionable truth, a path to glory and the fulfillment of a grandiose destiny. She internalizes the ideology to the point of making it an intrinsic part of her own identity, so that attacking her enemies and inflicting pain upon them becomes an extension of her own will and life purpose. This almost symbiotic fusion between herself and the ideology is what makes her so dangerous, unpredictable, and, paradoxically, so powerful in her cruelty. However, behind this facade of unshakable conviction and pleasure in chaos, the true monster, in its fullest and most terrifying form, was still dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge and consume everything in its path. The point at which Bellatrix Lestrange becomes completely irredeemable, and her soul seems irrevocably consumed by darkness, is marked by acts of profound transgression, which exceed all bounds of decency, morality, and humanity. Her active participation in events of extreme cruelty, her willingness to inflict deep pain, and her evident, almost ecstatic, pleasure in the suffering of others demonstrate that her worldview not only shifted but solidified into an almost irreversible form. From this moment on, concepts like ethics, compassion, and empathy completely lose their meaning for her, replaced by a merciless devotion and a thirst for power and recognition that utterly consumes her. She no longer sees the victims of her actions as individual beings with rights and feelings, but as mere obstacles to her cause or instruments for her sadistic amusement, devoid of value. For Bellatrix, her leader's cause is the supreme objective, the only truth, and any action that serves this cause, no matter how abominable, violent, or inhumane, is entirely justified and even necessary. There is an intricate and perverse rationalization of her acts, where the persecution of mudbloods and the oppression of her opponents are seen as indispensable steps toward, building a better and purified world, a world shaped exclusively by her master's distorted ideals and tyrannical will. She convinces herself that her actions are for a greater good, a necessary cleansing, even if that good is built upon the misfortune, torment, and ruin of others. This perspective leads us to a disturbing dilemma, forcing us to question the limits of human morality. Could it be that, within her own internal and distorted logic, Bellatrix was right in her devotion, following a path that for her was the only true one? This question compels us to confront the fragility of human convictions and how the pursuit of approval, belonging, and purpose, even if perverse and destructive, can completely derail a life, transforming it into an instrument of darkness and terror. The line of humanity was definitively crossed, and return seemed impossible. Bellatrix had plunged headfirst into the abyss of perversity, becoming a symbol of what extremist devotion can engender. Delving deeper into Bellatrix's psychological analysis, we realize that her actions, however disturbing and inhumane, make an unnerving sense within her own internal logic. Her devotion to the dark wizard transcends mere political or ideological loyalty. It borders on a form of blind worship, a total and unconditional surrender, where every cruel act and every display of violence are seen as a sacred sacrifice in the name of her cause, a way to prove her worth. This behavior can be compared to real-world cases of extreme fanaticism, where an individual's identity merges so completely with the cause they embrace that critical judgment, logical reasoning, and empathy are severely compromised or utterly annihilated. The leader becomes the absolute truth. Studies on group behavior, the psychology of crowds, and the influence of charismatic and manipulative leaders show how the quest for social acceptance, the need to feel special and part of something grand, and the promise of a superior purpose and future glory can lead individuals to adopt ideals and practices that, under other circumstances, would be unthinkable and morally repugnant. Bellatrix, in her eagerness for her master's approval and to stand out within his inner circle, becomes the perfect instrument for executing the darkest and cruelest plans. She isn't just a passive follower, but an extension of her leader's will, acting with calculated precision, chilling coldness, and a cruelty that masks the complexity of her internal motivations. This coldness, in large part, a psychological defense mechanism, allowing her to perform horrific acts without experiencing the burden of guilt, remorse, or the moral dissonance that would affect most people. Her emotional reactions are extreme, either total devotion and perverse joy in moments of victory, or absolute rage and contempt directed at those who oppose her cause, with no middle ground, no nuances. It wasn't sheer madness in the sense of a total disorganization of thought. It was a cold calculation, an unrelenting logic, tempered by an almost loving and obsessive devotion, seeking validation, power, and a distorted, yet intensely real sense of purpose for her. This is the perverse internal logic that fueled her cruelest actions and made her such a feared figure. After the destruction and chaos that Bellatrix Lestrange helped sow in the wizarding world, so incisively and relentlessly, what remains is an indelible legacy of pain, suffering, and a society profoundly marked by her brutal actions and the ideology she represented with such ferocity. Her story serves as a powerful and dark reminder of how blind loyalty, unchecked fanaticism, and the pursuit of distorted and limitless power can lead to unimaginable and devastating consequences for everyone around. Affected families, lives cut short, and shattered institutions bear the permanent scars of her fury and the ideology she so vehemently defended. The wizarding world, once divided by ideologies and conflicts, is forced to confront the deep scars left by the darkness Bellatrix embodied. Her figure, however terrifying, invites us to a deeper philosophical and psychological reflection on human nature and the dangers of indoctrination. Who are we to judge the complexities of a mind that was shaped by so many factors, including an environment of intense indoctrination from childhood, a desperate search for purpose, however perverse, and the overwhelming influence of a charismatic and manipulative leader? Bellatrix's story isn't just about the manifestation of evil in its purest form. It's about how devotion, when devoid of empathy, reason, and critical thinking, could transform into a path of devastation and destruction, and how the fundamental human need to belong and find meaning in life can be exploited, perverted, and distorted by external and internal forces. She becomes an archetype of the danger of extremism and the failure of morality, a dark mirror reflecting the fragilities of the human condition. But perhaps she wasn't the only one to walk such a path, and her story echoes in many other contexts, warning us of the dangers of ideological blindness and the ease with which human beings can be manipulated when desperately seeking a purpose, even if that purpose leads to darkness. Her legacy remains a somber reminder of the catastrophic consequences of embracing darkness without question. Bellatrix Lestrange's journey forces us to look into the darkest depths of the human mind, where devotion can dangerously intertwine with cruelty, and the pursuit of approval and belonging can shape a path of darkness. Her story leaves us with a disturbing and timeless reflection. To what extent can the search for purpose, for a place in the world, lead us to cross moral boundaries we would never have imagined? And are we truly immune to the allure of a cause, however disturbing and destructive it may seem at first glance? The answer to these questions lies in the constant vigilance of our own psyche and the courage to question.